Fifth graders, today we are going to read chapters 28 to 32 of A Tangle of Knots. Chapter 28 is titled Will. Sir Will had been marching for a while. He gripped his sword, the beige and cracked and knobby one that some might mistake for a precious heirloom or even a hairpin, and plopped himself down on a rock on the banks of River Street. It was awfully tiring, all this marching, especially when you'd gone and lost one of your shoes. And he missed his trusty steed Sally, and he hadn't even seen any giants yet, or monsters, or cake. He heard it before he saw it, the loud hissing like a furious creature sucking in an enormous breath of air. A monster! At last! Sir Will's eyes darted towards the noise. But it was no monster, only a boring old bus. Doing what boring old buses always did, letting off passengers at the bus stop, and then off stepped a giant. "Can I help you, young man?" To Will's delight, the giant was even more impressive up close. A real-life, humongous giant. Talking to him, knots of all sorts poked beneath the bottom edge of the giant's gray suit jacket. "Young man?" Will could barely remember how to blink. "I'm on an adventure," he breathed. He clutched his hairpin sword a little tighter, wishing Sally were with him. "Life is the grandest adventure one can go on, isn't it?" the giant said kindly. He seemed to be a very friendly giant. What else could a person ask for than to just be alive? Will knew exactly what else a person could ask for. "Monsters," he said, "and cake." The giant grinned a sideways sort of grin, a grin that suggested he knew more about the world than he was letting on. "Well," he said slowly, "I don't know about cake, but..." This was the part where the giant was going to ask if Will was lost, if it might be a good idea to try to find his parents. Grown-ups are always trying to find Will's parents. "I just so happen to know where there are quite a lot of monsters." The giant held out his hand, which was nearly as big as Will's head. "Shall I take you?" he asked. "It's near the balloon repair shop, not even a bit out of my way." Will thought about that, gazing at the man's mammoth hand. His parents had always been very clear that he should never, ever go anywhere with strangers. And they'd never said anything about giants. But they'd never said anything about giants. Chapter 29, The Owner. 53 years, and he'd finally found it. As soon as he touched the wrinkled brown paper, he knew. Perfect peanut butter. His throat tightened at the sight of his mother's loopy scrawl. The owner floated to the kitchen, scanning the recipe's ingredients as he went. Peanuts, oil, sugar, salt. Pretty standard stuff, but he supposed that, in the right quantities, any ingredients could be made magical. "Let's see who's the failure now, Dad," he thought as he shouldered open the heavy kitchen door. Chapter 30, Zane. The handle of the powder blue suitcase was slick in Zane's hand as he made his way into the last of the upstairs bedrooms, the owner's. Zane had little hope that the grump of an old man had anything that could earn Zane even a penny. But he was worthless, in all capitals. It couldn't help to look. Against the far wall sat a single bookshelf, stuffed to the gills with empty jars, probably 200 of them at least. Zane took them in. Empty jars wouldn't fetch a lot of money, that was for sure. And they'd be bulky, hard to carry, but there was something about them. Without knowing precisely why, Zane removed one of the empty jars from the shelf, studied it. He was going to need more suitcases. Chapter 31, Will. "Here we are," the giant told him after they'd been walking no more than 10 minutes. Will barely even noticed how sore his left foot was in its muddy sock. It was hard to notice a thing like that when you were walking with a real-life giant. "And this is where we must part ways, I'm afraid." "This is where the monsters are?" Will asked. "All sorts," the giant replied, grinning that sideways grin of him. "Bony ones, old ones, ones with jaws of massive teeth, some with fins or fangs or scales." Will raised his head up, to take in the immensity of the building before him. 4 stories high, shaped from cold gray stone. At the tippy top, the building's name was etched in 10-foot tall block letters. Poughkeepsie Museum of Natural Sciences. Clutching his hairpin sword, Sir Will let go of the giant's hand and stepped across the lawn to continue his adventure. Now we're on chapter 32, the last of the day. The owner. The owner stuck a tentative finger into the food processor, where his first batch of his mother's peanut butter sat, waiting. He scooped out a mound. It felt crunchy, goopy, perfect. Toes tapping anxiously 2 inches above the floor, the owner brought the peanut butter to meet his tongue and immediately spit it out. When the food processor hit the wall, just make sure I didn't skip. Okay. When the food processor hit the wall, the putrid batch of peanut butter splattered. The food processor splintered to bits. The owner sunk to the floor, chest heaving. He was breathing heavy. He'd followed the recipe word for word, and it was his mother's recipe, that was certain. The very same one he'd lost on the bus ride 53 years ago. But it did not taste anything like the Darlington peanut butter he had loved as a child. It did not taste like happiness. He closed his eyes, letting the truth sink in. It had taken 53 years, but finally, Mason Darlington Burgess, the good-for-nothing heir to the Darlington fortune, had discovered the secret ingredient to his own mother's peanut butter recipe. Take a wild guess. Talent, with a capital T. His mother had been talented all this time, and he'd never known. Nobody had ever known. It was a talent for churning happiness into her peanut butter that made his mother's results so stupendous. And even Mason Darlington Burgess didn't have a talent like that in his collection. He rose to his feet 2 inches off the ground. Mason didn't have the talent, but he thought he knew who might. And then we have Mrs. Asher's honey cake. Surprisingly spicy for such a sweet cake. So this is going to be added, you can't see, can you? This is going to be added to the recipe doc for you guys. And that's it. The next chapter is 33, Mrs. Asher. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great day.